I'm going to keep this very simple, I'm going to keep this very unedited, and as concise as I possibly can, so I apologize if there are any hiccups or any stuttering or things of that nature. I want this to be a raw video. 8 months ago on this channel, I made a video that was surrounding the controversies and my personal opinions of why you shouldn't give your support to the legendary Norwegian black metal singer and songwriter Varg Vikernes. And I think that a lot of people misinterpreted a lot of my points in that video and jumped to major conclusions based on my appearance, based on my voice, based on whatever you might want to do, and instead of listening to the points I made in that video and coming at me with logical, reasonable arguments based on that, it sort of divulged into a lot of insults and a lot of playground bantering in the comments section. The video currently stands at, I believe, 1.5k dislikes and over 22,000 views. It absolutely blew up, and it continues to be one of the videos on my channel that gains more and more views consecutively, and for all of the wrong and negative reasons. So I just want to, off the top of my head, do a response video and talk about many of the points that I've seen reiterated countless times in the comment section to hopefully provide some much needed clarity and enlightenment to where I was coming from with that video and why I believe what I do. Now, something that a lot of people really got wrong about me is how I looked at Varg's music, how I looked at Varg's bands, how I looked at Varg's artistry. He is an amazing songwriter, and without him laying the groundwork for what he did and what other amazing musicians in the early Norwegian black metal scene did, it would have not reached any bit of the fruition that it did. It would have not blossomed into the wonderful, just high-reaching, isolated, alienated genre that it is today. And while I don't agree with many of the ideologies of black metal in the way that they approach certain things, I still have a massive amount of respect for Varg's music. And contrary to what a lot of people think about me, I've listened to many Varg projects. I've listened to solo Varg projects, and probably have watched more of his videos than many of the half-wits that commented on that video. That's another thing. People thought I was so misinformed about the information that was given, that I had no logic, that I had no opinions of Varg, and that I was only in some echo chamber basing it on everyone else around me. That's not the case, because if I was like not wanting controversy, if I thought that it was just a well-accepted opinion, I don't think that as many dislikes and hate comments would have appeared on that video. So I have done massive amounts of research on Varg for many years, to the point to where I even have wanted to do a whole video essay on the early Norwegian black metal scene, because it's intricate, it's complicated, and boiling it down to a simple thing is quite literally impossible. But it doesn't have any stain on Varg as a musician or the research that I have done on him. I've watched many of his re-uploads, and back when Varg was actually on the YouTube platform, before the times that he got banned, I did watch his channel, and even though I didn't agree with him, he was always a very fascinating figure because his opinions were very different than what a lot of people think, and obviously a lot of people latched onto him because if there is an extreme opinion, if there is an extreme ideology, people are going to want to leech off that, especially if there aren't many people in the mainstream or anywhere that echo the same sentiments. You're going to want to latch on to sort of this messiah-like figure for all of the pariahs, because every time that you don't have a voice, you're going to look to someone for guidance, you're going to look to someone for direction, and Varg very accurately provided that for a lot of disenfranchised people that like the black metal genre and held a lot of extreme opinions. And you can call it whatever you want, but whether or not Varg himself still holds the same opinions that he once did about white nationalism, about Nazism, about white supremacy, about his paganism, it doesn't change the fact that the people that are attracted to him very much hold those ideas. And whether or not he himself is promoting that, if you have mass amounts of negative people with the wrong sort of opinions drawn to you, I think that says a lot about your preaching, and it says a lot about your sort of your speech patterns, because that doesn't come out of nowhere, and you could be the best person in the world, but if you have all of these people that just happen to be drawn to you, that are of this flock, birds of a feather flock together, and I think that very much happened with Varg, I'm not saying that Varg hasn't changed over the years or mellowed out, but mellowing out doesn't really change the fact that Varg held a lot of these very extreme opinions up until his 20s, up until his 30s, and they didn't necessarily vanish. These were things that he had to begin with, and even if he doesn't have these same extreme opinions now, it's not hard to see that they still sort of lead to the same destination, even if he ended up taking a different avenue to get there. He might not be like he was in prison, but he's still based a lot of his opinions to this day on that. And the funny thing is, you have all these people that are talking to me about paganism and about, classic paganism, neo-paganism, and how traditionalist views are very important, and how ancestry is very important, and bloodlines are very important. Acting, and I don't expect people to know this, not knowing that I fucking have Native American and Scottish roots in me. So don't come to my door preaching about ancestry and preaching about traditionalism, because I have been a student of those things for many, many years of my life, and I am very familiar with it. I own a lot of Celtic iconography, and I think paganism and neo-paganism are very important things for those cultures. So I'm not stamping on the way that he approaches it, I'm stamping on the methods and execution that he goes about to make that. And that's not even getting into the murder of Euronymous. You can swear up and down about how it was self-defense and how it was, justified, and reason with it, but no one except who was in that room will ever understand what exactly happened. And you can take Varg's words at face value, but without knowing the proper history behind it, without knowing all of the interviews that Varg has done and other black metal people have done, it's much more complicated than that, and justifying murder in cold blood based on the back of self-defense without reasonable evidence to really back that up. You can believe what Varg says and you can believe the reports, but there is a lot of complications to it because it is a well-spooled yarn that has a lot of intertwining little bits and pieces to it that you can't really just judge a book by its cover. But I think overall, sort of circling back to one thing I said, for me, I don't think Varg is the same person that he was in his youth, and a lot of people seem to think that I was comparing him to his youth and comparing him to the extreme measures that he went to in his youth. Yes, they are stains, yes, they are blots, and people can change. You shouldn't hold people accountable to the things that they did decades and decades ago. But at the same point, the opinions that he used to have diverged, and whether or not they have mellowed out or not doesn't change the fact that a lot of his roots definitely defined who he is as a person now, and whether or not he's hurting people now, it doesn't really matter given the fact that you are still actively supporting it. Now, I am a big proponent of separating art from artists. Some of my favorite artists, some of my favorite bands have been made up of some very sick motherfuckers that have done some sick shit, and that doesn't change just because they make good music. So I respect Varg a lot as a musician, because I think he is a very talented musician and clearly one of the best to ever do it. But people really just don't have arguments to back it up, and it's very telling that you're worshiping this individual, you're worshiping his words, you're worshiping his actions. You see him as a figurehead, you don't see him as just a musician, you see him as someone that is worthy of just putting on this pedestal and looking above. And I'm not saying that like my word's the gospel, because you can listen to whatever the hell you want, you can support whoever the hell you want, that's never going to change. But the gross underselling of the things that he has done and the sick justifications of the disgusting actions that he has committed in his past and the way that his opinions have aligned with the things that he has done in his past, I think is very telling of the type of audience that he has attracted over the years. People that are very blind, people that are very deaf, to some very stationary things that are static and immovable, and they're very easy to describe even if the scene is rough and rigid. People just say it's anger, it's aggression, it's isolation, it's self-defense, it's an act against the state, it's an act against religion, it's an act against the church. And you start to stack these things up and up and up, and it becomes more of like a rebellious nature, which that's what black metal has always been. And black metal from the get-go was a bunch of very angsty, very depressed, very anxious, very mentally disturbed individuals that wanted to make outsider culture and outsider music, from the aesthetics to the production to the lyrics to to the album covers, to the history of it. It's a grim and forlorn place, and boiling Varg down to just being this happy-go-lucky Santa figure sitting on a chair talking about paganism without realizing the history, I think a lot of people need to go do their own research, and I think a lot of people need to go do their own research work on who Varg is and his past and the other people and how this all links up as a spider web. But the amount of people that have thought that I am uneducated, that I have not done my research, that I've never watched Varg, that I've never listened to Varg, that I've never done any of these things, or that I don't know what I'm talking about. I have a background with many of the things that Varg fights for, of many of the things that Varg calls home ideology-wise, and I still disagree with it, because at the end of the day, you can love someone's music, but that doesn't mean you have to love the person, and that's the issue. I feel like people love Varg as a person. They don't separate him from his music, they back up his ideology, they back up his words and actions, and they justify it with any little rationale that they have in their head, as if he has every alibi in the world to do these acts. And I think that's wrong, and I guess this is just my response video. People really need to get their heads out of their asses in terms of their arguments, because half of these people can't even speak English, and I'm not talking about foreign people, I'm talking about people that are clearly English or people from America, and y'all really have baseline insults. It's always my voice, it's always my appearance, it's always my age, and that gets boiled down to anything because no one has actual grounds to stand on most of the time in these arguments and these serious discussions and any thought-provoking material that actually makes them question the people that they worship like gods really gets to them, and it's very, very telling of how many insecurities these people have for the people that they worship. And if anyone wants to add something to this, or if anyone wants to talk to me about this, go ahead in the comment section and say what you'd like. I would absolutely love to hear some actual reasonable discussion about this, but knowing Varg fans, that's very doubtful. Peace.